Today is Tuesday, August 1st, 2017, and this is the Don't Stifle Me podcast. My name is Jacob Stiefel. Welcome. I'm glad you stopped by. I'm glad you're here. How you doing? How's it going today? Did you have a good breakfast this morning? Did you drink enough coffee? You know what? I think I'll have a little bit more. Hold on. So good. Anyway, this is episode 22, and this episode, like the ones before it so far, is brought to you by the musical career of yours truly. I am a singer-songwriter, and through the years in this crazy business, I've met some really interesting and great people, and so I decided to start sitting down with them and recording conversations, and I thought I'd just pass it along to you all out there in listener world. If you're interested, I do have music on iTunes and Spotify and all that, and you can find tour dates and merchandise of mine over at jacobstifle.com. But in the meantime, I am just Jacob, your friendly podcast host and companion. So let's get on with the getting on, and here is episode 22.
Pick it up the piano.
With me today is the incomparable Jimbo Hart. He's been the longtime bass player for Jason Isbell and the 400 unit. In fact, the first time I ever saw Jimbo, he was playing with Jason and the band on stage at the Ryman Auditorium, and I was front row center. But he's one of the most laid back and coolest guys you'll ever meet. Extremely knowledgeable about music and gear, and that's all on top of being just a badass bass player. So Jimbo was gracious enough to sit down with me and another special guest, Mr. Chance Gray, in a hotel room out in Austin, Texas a couple of weeks ago, and here's our talk. How you doing, Jimbo?
Good. How you guys doing?
I'm happy to be sitting in air conditioning in
Indeed.
Austin, Texas.
Yeah, it's hot outside.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been outside today or not.
I have a couple of times.
Oof.
Met some interesting folks outside.
Yeah.
I ran into a fellow named G who was smoking a fine cigar, who I believe is the tour manager for Jimmy Vaughn. And I think they're playing at Antone's tonight, which is one of my favorite Austin establishments.
Yeah.
Yes, we used to play at Antone's when it was on the corner of, I forget what it was. I think it was on 5th Street, maybe. But yeah, it moved down the street towards San Jacinto, and I think they're playing there tonight. And it was cool talking with him.
We are, for those of you out there, I don't know if we said it or not, we're in Austin, Texas, looking out the window through, that's the river right there? Yeah.
That is the river.
Yeah.
It's the Colorado River.
The river runs through it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the bridge where the bats come out at night.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's also a pool down there that we're in Chance Gray's hotel room. Chance, how you doing over there?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Holding it down.
Very thankful to be here. Very proud to be here.
Yeah. And Chance has a great view out his window of the pool.
He does have a lovely view out his window of the pool. It's
Yeah.
a nice pool.
Which is heavily inhabited right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see these binoculars over here by the window. You been spying at girls? There's not binoculars over here. I'm just kidding. But, so Chance joined me today to talk to the fantastic Jimbo Hart, bass player extraordinaire
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I appreciate your kindness.
of the 400 unit.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. For how long you been playing for Jason Isbell in the 400 unit?
I believe we started gigging together as this particular, as Jason in the 400 unit around 2006, I believe, March or so of 2006.
How long was that after he left the Truckers?
If I can recall, which is, my memory's kind of foggy of that time, it was
Foggy or smoky?
Well, whichever you want to call it. I think there was several months before, in between those things happening. Turning the air conditioner off.
Gotta remember things like that. It's okay, people. It's okay. I'm here.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Truckers.
Oh, no
Few
worries.
months.
Yeah, so it was a few months after all that, and yeah, just one day he was up and like, man, we got to pay the rent. You want to go play some shows? And I was like, yeah, let's go play some shows. Yeah. He had a whole bunch of songs already and stuff, and so we just started playing shows. And
rock and roll. We'll rewind before that. Where were you born and raised? Let's start at the beginning of Jimbo Hart.
Oh, I was born in Eliza Coffey Memorial Hospital in Florence, Alabama, and I lived in Florence for a few years. I think early on as a very tiny child. I lived in Tuscumbia for a minute as a tiny child, and then eventually my mom and I wound up settling in Sheffield.
So the greater Muscle Shoals area for since day one.
Yeah, I still live there too.
Yeah,
I live in Florence now.
Okay, so you commute back and forth. Like do you come up and meet the Jason and the guys?
Yeah, Nashville. Yeah. I love the drive. It's beautiful. I go. Do
you usually cut across, or do you go over to Athens and go up?
I mix it up. You know, sometimes I'll take the Lawrenceburg route, and sometimes I'll take the Minor Hill.
Go hang out with the Amish people.
Yeah, drive past, check them out, make sure they're all doing good. They still have the best vegetables. I mean, you want real good vegetables, you got to go to those folks.
Handmade bed frames.
All kinds saddles,
of stuff. Mattresses. Don't they make mattresses too? I don't know. I might have just made that up.
I got no idea.
So you went to school there. When did you start playing music?
Well, my dad gave me a guitar when I was like 5, and I took lessons for a little bit, and my hands weren't very strong, and I couldn't really do it all that well. Mm-hmm. I kind of got the concept of it, but my hands were just kind of weak, and so the guitar kind of hung out in my bedroom for a lot of years. I think it became more of a G.I. Joe battle fort platform than anything else.
Nice.
For a lot of years, and then my dad married a lady whose family was quite musical, and they would get together on the weekends and jam. And my Uncle Bob had I thought he was the coolest dude, and he had a big Gibson Ripper bass, and he had the big custom, tuck and roll leather cabinet. It's like I think it was like a 315 or some crazy configuration like that, and I just thought the bass was so cool because it would just kind of rumble the whole house, and you really couldn't tell what was going on, but you sure knew when it wasn't there.
Yeah,
sure. And when it was there, and and one of those nights I was just sitting there by Bob, and he took off his bass and handed it to me. He said, "Hold this, I gotta go take a leak and get a beer." And I put it on my lap and played a couple of notes, and I've pursued it ever since.
Yeah. How old were you about that time?
I was like 11.
Nice.
Yeah. I got a bass for Christmas that year.
That year?
Yeah.
So did you take lessons or anything, or did you just kind of...
I did. I took lessons for a few years with various teachers around town.
Yeah.
I took a few lessons from a fellow named Tony Cooper, who was more of a guitar player. But my uncle, George Grandinetti, he was a guitar player, and he gave me lessons for the first couple of years. And I also joined the band program in middle school, mm-hmm. and they put me on the cornet, and I was a terrible trumpeter. And after the cornet, they tried to move me to the mellophone, and I was even worse at the mellophone.
Mellophone? What is a mellophone?
It's like a marching version of a French horn.
Okay.
It uses the same mouthpiece, and I think it has a bit less tubing than a French horn. But
interesting.
And then I wound up then they put me on the tuba, and I had a blast playing the tuba.
Oh, yeah.
And then I wound up on the euphonium, and I played that for most of high school. But I also marched in the high school marching band with the bass guitar.
Really?
Yeah, and that was a real gas.
How did you march with the bass guitar?
Well, thankfully, my band director had done this before, and he had this huge steel cart, and on the front of the cart there was a 215 PV Black Widow speaker cabinet and a PV Mark IV, like 400 watt solid state head on top of it, and on the back of the cart there was a little tray with a deep cycle marine battery and a DC to AC converter. and a charger. And what we had to do was like you had to run the whole series. Like you plug the amp and everything to the converter, and the charger into the wall, and then charge the battery. But the only way we could get the rig to work is you plug the charger into the wall, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then turn the converter on, and then unplug it, and you're good to go all day. But you had to plug it in first. So there was always that.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Sheffield.
Sheffield?
Yeah.
And so y'all marched on the football field.
Yeah.
And you were in a wagon car?
No. I was on foot. I was marching.
Oh.
And there was a guy behind me. There was a guy behind me pushing this cart with this amp on it.
That's the job you want.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, it was funny. Like I had several different kids along the way come along and try to take the gig of being the amp guy.
Yeah.
And I finally wound up on one fella who did an extraordinary job of it. He would march in time, and like he was great. He took it very seriously.
I mean, they had to march too. It was just like
Well, they didn't have to because they weren't considered part of the band. They were more considered
just a moving speaker,
Band-Aid or a speaker. Yeah, but eventually my buddy Anthony Sheffield, who wound up oddly enough being named at the same name as the school, he wound up really enjoying it, and he did a wonderful job, and I'll never forget that. That was a really good time.
That's awesome. So did you know you wanted to pursue a future in music? Like, since you started playing, you knew this is what I want to do.
Yeah, I had dreams, man.
Yeah. Did you have what kind of music did you listen to growing up? What kind of stuff did you listen to growing up? Influences and stuff.
My dad listened to a lot of rock and roll and a lot of soul, and I recall the first few voices that I ever heard come out of a radio. I think the first one was probably Ray Charles, and the second one was probably Willie Nelson, and then
some good ones,
Michael Jackson. And I was a huge Michael Jackson fan when I was little. Yeah, I still am. I mean, I don't ever turn the radio if I hear any kind of Michael Jackson tune. I'm like, whoa, stop there. Yeah, maybe I can learn something. Right. And but he also listened to a lot like James Taylor and Elton John and classic 70s rock and stuff like that too. And so I was kind of around all that, and
When did you start getting together with other musicians, like outside of school, like in jamming, like with bass and guitars and stuff?
I was pretty soon after getting a bass. Yeah. And pretty soon after getting an amplifier. Right. I had a bass for a year before I ever had an amplifier. And the first amp that I got was actually my dad's amp, oddly enough. It was a Music Man RD 130 head and a 115 cabinet. And it was a pretty rocking little rig, but, when you go to try to play real deal rock and roll, you got guitar players with the same or bigger amplifiers, and there's just no keeping up. Right. And my dad built me a speaker cabinet with two 12s and a 15, and I wound up getting this crate 200-watt head, and that was my rig until I was like 14. So
he built the cabinet?
Oh yeah, and that thing would rattle the walls, man. We would practice at my buddy's house, and they had this old house in Sheffield had plaster walls, Yeah. And I remember coming downstairs one day, and my buddy's dad is a bass player, a fellow named Butch Ledford. He played with lots of folks around the Shoals in the 70s, and he's great, funky bass player. But I came downstairs, and he was sitting on his chair, and he just looked at me and goes, "Man, you're knocking plaster off the wall. You're going to turn it down." I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." So I turned it down, and I told Dad about it, and he was kind of proud.
That's so I guess you were probably well aware of. So when you were growing up in that time, like high school, junior high, what was that? What years was that?
Oh goodness, I graduated in high school in '97, so it probably would be like 90s.
So throughout the 90s,
91, 90 to 93 or so.
Were you like well aware of the history of Muscle Shoals and the recording and all that?
Well, yeah, not well aware of it, but aware that it was a thing. Yeah. The house that I grew up in was a couple of blocks from the Muscle Sound studio that the Swampers moved into first when they split from Rick. Yeah. Mr. Hall, sorry. If you're listening, I'm sorry, sir. But yeah, I used to ride my bike by that place all the time, and I would look at it and I go, that's a studio. And they did stuff there.
Yeah.
But it didn't really hit me what they did there.
Right.
At the time, you know. When
yeah, I grew up, Chance and I both grew up over in Fort Payne or the Fort Payne area. And I never really, even doing stuff in music and being involved in music and loving music until probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, I never really like studied the stuff that went on in Muscle Shoals. And
yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And now I'll talk to somebody that doesn't know and isn't aware, and I'm like, you just look into it. I just wanna
right.
Start go research it, watch the documentary, and then
Start there.
Yeah,
yeah.
So so you started jamming and stuff at that point. When did you have like your first band, and when did you start playing gigs and that kind of thing?
Well, oddly enough, same friends of mine that I was playing with when I was 12, you know, we knocked the plaster off the wall and all that. My buddies at the time, we had a little band, and the principal singer, songwriter in the band, a fellow named Mikey Ledbetter. He's still around Muscle Shoals, still a great songwriter, still does gigs and stuff, and I love him. He's still like my brother. But we had a band going on, and his uncle had a band, and they played at like Elks Lodges and things like that. And there were some things that happened in the bass player's family in that band that I won't get into. And I got a call from Mikey's uncle one afternoon, like, hey, would you be interested in playing at the Elks Lodge with us this weekend? And I'm like 12, 13 years old. And I was like, well, yeah, sure. Let me ask my mom. You know, and I went and asked my mom, and she was like, okay, sure. All right, you can do that. How much are you making? And I told her what they had offered me.
Yeah.
It was like, like $50 or something like that.
Right.
She was like, okay, all right. And it was on the weekend, so I didn't have school.
Right.
So she let me do it. And
first gig at like 12, 13, that's not bad.
Yeah, and I wound up playing with those guys for like a year or two, I think, off and on. Like they would some gigs would pop up and they'd call me and I'd go play. And through that, I met a fellow named Ralph Rhodes who had a little studio in downtown Sheffield, and Mikey's uncle Glenn introduced me to Ralph, and Ralph called me one night and asked me to come play bass on a song that a friend of his had written, and I went down there and I plugged my bass up, you know, and he was like, all right, play a little bit, and I played a little bit, and I got the level and everything, and he played the song for me one time, and I only knew like a handful of bass lines at the time, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, which one of these works?
Just mixed them in where they fit.
Which one of these that I already know works with this? And it wound up being the first bass line I ever learned, which is like the standard boogie thing, the you know, that thing.
Yeah.
And so it just so happened to fit perfectly over that, and so I just you know, put it down on the tape, and I think I got it on the first pass.
Just blew their minds. That was perfect, man.
Well, I mean, I was kind of like, it kind of blew my mind too, you know, because I mean, I didn't understand that I should have been a little intimidated by this situation, and that maybe, you know, something could happen from this recording in the future. I didn't think about any of that. I just thought, hey, somebody wants me to come record something. Well, that sounds fun.
The simplicity of what you knew at that point might have actually helped. Because you're like, I know these three things and this one fits, so I'll just do this.
Sure.
Then, you know.
Yeah. And it literally took 15 minutes. And I remember calling my mom when it was done. I'd already had my bass packed up, everything. And like, I called my mom.
Well, that was easy.
And I said, Mom, can you come pick me up? And she was like, was it that bad? And I was like, no, I'm done. She's like, what? You done? 15? You just left 10 minutes ago, you know? Yeah. And I guess that's the beauty of a small town. It any time to get anywhere. Sometimes.
Did you go to college or anything?
I went to the University of North Alabama for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And,
what did you study?
I started out. I wanted to major in geology because I really like science and the earth and things pertaining to the earth.
Did you do that, you think, in hindsight, because you felt like you were supposed to go to college?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think anyone in my family had ever went to college.
Oh, okay.
So they were kind of expecting me to go. And I went, and I did the thing. But at the same time, I was a musician, and I started playing with some folks in some bars and stuff. And I wasn't old enough to drink even then. Right. But I was starting to get some bar gigs and things. And, you throw a Wednesday night bar gig into a full-on sophomore schedule.
Yeah, it kind of throws a wrench in things.
Kind of messes you up, even if you don't drink or do anything. If you just go out there and play until 2 o'clock in the morning and get home at 4, you still got to be up at 6 and go to school
to try
at
to
7.
Go to 8 o'clock class.
8 o'clock, 8 o'clock class. So after a short bit of that, I just figured out that man, I just want to be a bass player. I've taken all of the classes that I want to take. Because eventually I figured out I didn't want to be in geology. I wanted to be. I changed my major to like production, whatever production course they had at the time.
Yeah.
And at the time they had an 8-track or an 8-bus Soundcraft console. They had a studio 8-bus Soundcraft and I believe it was a Tascam or a Fostex. A Fostex 16-track machine, with tape, and a couple of big speakers and a couple of little Oratones, and a rack of, compressors and all that kind of stuff. I think they had an ADAT machine too.
What do you like better, playing live or recording? It's a tough question.
That is a tough question.
Yeah.
Man, that's tough. That's hard to say.
With me, when somebody asks me that, it's kind of like when somebody asks what's your favorite song is. Like, well, it depends on the day.
Yeah.
It depends on how I feel right now.
Well, I definitely feel like recording to me plays a more important role, I think, in my overall quest as a musician.
Yeah.
And I think all of us that play and do what we do have a overall quest. We all have dreams, and you want to chase them, you want to get to them, you want to get past them, you want to find new ones. You have to keep feeding yourself these things, and I feel like recording is a way to really to put your stamp on it. It's a way to pass your thing along. I mean, hopefully those recordings will last longer than I will.
For sure.
So,
when did you meet Jason?
I met Jason. I think we were like, he and I were probably like 14 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did he grew up like outside of like Sheffield, like that? Like,
yeah, he grew up in the
Muscle
country
Shoals
in Green Hill.
I couldn't remember. I knew it was at like, 15, 20 minutes out. Downtown or whatever.
Yeah, it's a little bit out.
Where'd y'all meet?
I believe we met at my high school because his high school had all the marching they had a really nice marching competition.
Yeah.
And our high school went there every year to compete, and their band always played the finale and they always killed it. And Jason played trumpet and he was a phenomenal trumpet player at the time. And, I mean, as a band nerd, you hear about the kids across town.
Right.
And all this kind of
stuff. Does he still play trumpet? On the road? And
no.
Like on the bus? Does he ride down the bus?
I think it would be fun if he did, though.
Maybe you should.
I think it's in his bag.
You should tell him to get on that.
Yeah, that would blow my mind.
It's definitely in his bag to do.
I'm sure he could. Yeah,
sure.
So all right, so y'all heard about each other or whatever, and just got introduced at some point.
Yeah, well, my high school decided to host a marching competition, first one they'd ever tried to do, and I believe my band director had probably sought his band director out for some advice and maybe some help. And I believe Jason and a few other students from his school came over to help us out. and I was kind of the gopher kid because I think I was a junior that year or something, or maybe a sophomore or something. But I'd been in the band program for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really have one particular job. My job was just to go around to everybody and make sure they didn't need anything, or make sure everybody was good. And Jason was in the parking lot behind the stadium, parking the buses. And I walked back there to the back, and he was standing there, parking a bus, telling them where to park and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, "Hey, you're that guy that plays guitar. You're Jason, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're that kid that plays bass. You're Jimbo, right?" I was like, "Yeah, man." And we hit it off right then, and I had to go do other things, and so I took off.
Yeah.
And and there was a little restaurant in Florence that we all used to go to, where you could be underage and watch the band as long as you spent like $10 on nachos,
right?
Or buy a quesadilla or something, and they'll let you hang out. And our friend Barry Billings, who's probably one of the best educators as far as music goes in northern Alabama. To my knowledge, there's a really great school in Huntsville, musicology, that's doing some great things for kids and stuff.
Awesome.
But Barry, their band would play at LaFonda's, and you'd never know who would be in there because it's Muscle Shoals. You just never know who's going to be where. Sometimes some of the Swamper guys would be in there hanging out, and sometimes, my bunch of kids would be hanging out in there, and Jason and his friends would be hanging out in there, and they would get us all up to sit in individually. If they found out you could play, they would call you up, and they'd throw a song at you. That's cool. I remember one time they called me up and wanted me to play Stormy Monday, and I was like 15, man. I'd never even heard Stormy Monday.
Yikes. And
the bass player at the time, Joey Flippin, was standing right behind me, like telling me numbers, like 1, 4, 4 sharp, And
so you learned the number thing pretty early?
Well, at that point, I didn't really know it.
No, okay.
But I kind of caught on to what he was saying at the time, and it made just a very little bit of sense. And I slaughtered it. I mean, it was terrible. I had no idea what I was doing. I think Jason probably did pretty well, but I wasn't hip to that. I was into like Nirvana and punk rock, Metallica.
Yeah, the 90s, I guess. Yeah, if you were,
rap. I was into Dr. Dre, all that kind of stuff.
Chance, a big Dr. Dre fan.
I love him.
Yeah,
he's great. He's a genius.
I just marathoned the Defiant ones. I almost said the Deviant ones. Well, I told Chad I watched the Deviant ones the other day, and he was like, Defiant. I was like, oh, shit.
Thanks, Chad.
Brain fart. But yeah, I just watched the Defiant ones the other day, and that's a great series.
Is that? I think I heard. Is that the series about him?
Yeah, him and Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah,
yeah.
I heard somebody talking about it, but I haven't watched it yet.
Two incredible minds, man.
Yeah,
yeah.
When was the first time that you and Jason were in a band? Did y'all jam, have any gigs together before you became Jason of the 400 Unit?
We did 2 or 3 shows as a 3-piece, and it was just billed under his name, and it was he and I and Mike Dillon, who later wound up being the drummer for the 400 Unit for a little while on the road in between drummers several years ago.
Yeah.
Still a great friend of mine and my family. He still works in Muscle Shoals and stuff a lot. Still a hell of a drummer.
Nice. Chance, do you have any questions for Jimbo? Do you have any input over there? How you doing?
I do have a question.
All right.
I know the answer, but a lot of people listening probably don't know the answer. And I get asked this question a lot.
Yeah.
Where did the 400 Unit name come from?
Yeah. Good one.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, and I think this is how it goes. I know that there used to be this thing in Florence. There's a hospital, Eliza Coffey Memorial, where I was born, and next to it there's a mental health facility called Riverbend. And back in the day, they used to the people that were there that weren't violent or dangerous, they would like once or twice a week, they would put them all in a van and go into town, give them a little bit of money, and let them out into town.
Goodness.
For an afternoon, and then, you know, come pick them up in the afternoon. And I've got a friend or two that have driven that van before that told me it was one of the coolest gigs they ever had, you know, because they're just really fun people, you know, and
for sure,
interesting people, and, you know, they're not dangerous, but they're, you know. But so, yeah, we just decided to call it that because being in a band to us was a lot like that, you know, because we're just kind of, you get in a van, you get out of the van, you go kind of nuts for a little while, and you get back in the van.
People look at you weird.
Yeah. Yeah, people look at you weird.
Because you're different from them.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So
It's great, yeah.
it just kind of came to that one day in the van. I think we were on like maybe it was one of the first tours we ever did. Yeah.
Did you start out like with Jason, even before that, the stuff you were doing, were you doing cover stuff and original stuff?
Yeah.
Or like, okay.
Yeah.
Because there's always the question, like some people say, oh, you got to just do original, don't do bullshit covers. And then some people do a lot of covers. And,
my band of buddies that I played with when I was in my teenage years enjoyed the same kind of music. And Mikey wrote a lot of songs. Sounds like there's some sort of dying animal in the hallway out there of the hotel.
I thought that was Chance making some noise over there.
Wow.
It's not me.
Maybe we should invite
wasn't
those
me.
folks in to hang out with us. That could be kind of fun. Oh yeah, but Mikey wrote a bunch of songs, and we played his songs, and we also played songs that we just liked.
Yeah.
And at one point, I remember before Jason joined the Truckers, my friends and I, we had this band. We were trying to change up things a little bit, and we needed a guitar player, and a few folks came by and I guess auditioned for the spot or jammed with us or whatever you want to call it. And Jason was one of those folks, and he fit us like a glove because that's kind of what he does as a guitar player. He can play with anybody.
Yeah.
Wonderfully. And so, you know, we were like, hey man, you're welcome to be in our band if you want to be in our band. He was like, hell yeah, cool, awesome. And then I think literally like a month later or something, like I think Patterson
Truckers thing
scooped him up. They were gone.
Did you know those
And I
guys?
was so proud of him. You know, no, I didn't know him, but you hear about him.
Yeah, they were originally from over there, right? Or from that
Yeah,
area.
yeah.
And then, but they got their first like success or whatever, wasn't it? At Athens, Georgia.
Well, I think they all relocated, or Patterson and Mike might have moved to Athens, or maybe Mike lived in Athens. I'm not totally sure on all that.
But you just knew of them, but you weren't.
Yeah. I'd heard people talk about Patterson for years before I'd ever heard any of his music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So when you started, after Jason left the Truckers, and he was like, "Hey man, I need to make some money. We'll start playing some gigs." Was that covers and originals, or like what kind of shows? What kind of shows were you playing?
He was mostly playing his own stuff, and we didn't do like long set kind of things. We just played like one set, and that was it.
I think we should talk about the grind that you guys have been through.
Yeah.
You know, we dug back in time to 2006 and previous. It is now 2017.
Is it?
Good things are
Holy
happening.
shit.
There's a lot
Great
of
things are
There's a
happening
lot of
for
time
y'all.
in there in between.
Right, yeah.
Where you guys, you know, and just from being around all of you the last few weeks or the last year, you know, hearing you talk about just grinding it out in the van and trailer, touring the country, flat tires, snowstorms.
Putting the spare tire on the trailer backwards, and then wind up going to a tire place, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll tell you the problem with your trailers. Your tires on backwards. Y'all in a band or something?"
Yeah.
Yeah, that's happened to us before.
Was it just the band guys on the road for a while? Or?
Yeah, well, we had various tour managers over the years.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was just us and another person for a lot of time.
That was that's years of, like Chance said, just grinding it out.
Yeah.
And
There was a lot of time that we all hated each other, but we all love each other.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it really, you know, it was hard, man. There were some times that were really hard, and we made it harder on ourselves by doing it the way we did, you know. And I think we all realize that's kind of an obvious thing now. But, you know, we don't have to do that anymore, and thank God. And but yeah, a lot of it, you know, you sacrifice a lot when you're just gone all the time.
For sure.
You know, I mean, it's hard to maintain relationships. It's hard to progress in relationships. It's hard to fight with your person, your significant other. It's hard to even be happy with your significant other when you're a long way away.
Yeah.
And you add that on to everything else too, and you really do, at some point, you just feel like you just have to put your head down and charge.
Yeah.
Charge forward. And you're going to hit that wall. When you hit it, just make sure you hit it on the side that's going to hurt the least.
Yeah.
You know? And,
because there had to been times where you, like...
I keep saying that, and, what?
It's all good. There had to been times where
I
you...
sound like my 8th grade science teacher. And Pluto is the 9th planet in the solar system. And Jack Bobo, he was a good man.
Were there times? I mean, there had to have been times when, like, you questioned. Were there times like when you questioned your future doing what you're doing? Like, were you ever out there changing a tire and not making much money and away from people that you might have wanted to be with, and thought, why am I doing this?
Oh,
or
sure.
like that?
Yeah. But not at the same time, I try to just turn all that off sometimes, you know, because you can't focus on that if you're in the middle of something.
Yeah.
You know, and if you commit to something, I firmly believe you got to see it through. You know, I would never. Well, I've only quit one gig in the middle of it, and that was because the man was threatening to kill me, and so I bought a car myself and drove halfway across the country home. But that's a good reason to quit, though. Yeah.
If somebody says they're going to kill you, see ya.
Well, you know, steroids do crazy things to people. You know.
I told Jimbo the other day, if I ever see him buying a car on the road, I know what's about to happen. I'm going to stop.
Well, I don't think at this point that'd be the thing. And if I bought a car on the road, it'd be like something that I just couldn't live without. And I just finished the tour in the car behind the bus.
Got this El Camino, now I'm going home.
Right, if it'll make it. Nah.
When could you start to see the light of success getting closer in the tunnel? If that makes any sense. Like when, because the van and trailer, how long were y'all in van and trailer? Were you still in van and trailer at Southeastern when that came out?
Yeah. When at the beginning of all that, we were still in the van and trailer.
When did y'all go to a bus or whatever? I guess was that after the success of that?
Yeah, it was sometime after that.
Yeah.
What'd you think the first day you got on a bus?
Wow. I'd been on buses before with other bands that I'd played with before that. And, you know, the first artist that I toured with on a bus had to earn that bus, you know, and had been around for a while. And it was a very short stint with that artist. And so I'd been on a bus before. And then there was another band that I was in who had some major label support behind a record, and there was some bus riding on that venture. But
they hadn't necessarily put in the time to get to
exactly. I'd never been in a band that had started out at one point and evolved to something like that.
It's just such a great thing to see that I think a lot of people, up and coming artists or bands or whatever, I don't think they realize how much grind and effort it takes to get the fans that y'all have.
Yeah. It's a lot like evangelical preaching. You got to take it out there to the people.
Yeah.
And you got to sweat at them. You got to sweat it out. You got to do it, you know.
Yeah.
You got to take it to them. And you got to do your best every day, and you got to do better than you did the day before.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do better than you did the day before, you don't learn anything. And if you don't learn anything, you can't progress. So there's this constant need to do it better.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then you won't. And if
It's great for life.
If you get to where you want, then it's just everything's going to suffer. So you just have to think in terms of do it better, whether you can or not.
Y'all were playing at the Grammys.
Grim is pre-loved music.
And I was at like up on the balcony or whatever above y'all up there at a friend's work office, and I was looking out just on the crowd, and it was in between songs, and Jason was talking, and y'all were doing whatever, and everybody out there was just like so intently watching and listening. And it's like that at most all of your shows that I've been to, and paying attention to the people. And I told somebody next to me that was an artist or songwriter or something, I said, look out there. I said, that's the people that you want to be interested in your music. Yeah. Because those are the people that care and listen to the words and listen to the music and will support the band.
A lot of those guys have been around since the beginning too. Yeah. Like we have a lot of really loyal fans that have stuck it out through bad nights and times when we were maybe all of us were too drunk to even stand up. We were so loud early on that I think we punished ourselves with volume just as much as we did with liquor and all of that.
Did y'all ever have one of those meetings that bands have at some point, like to where you're like, okay, we got to stop getting so hammered drunk on stage or anything like that, or just kind of?
No, Jason made the decision on his own for his own benefit. Yeah. And I was never really much of a drinker anyway. I've got my own reservations about alcohol. Yeah. And when he decided to go sober, it was more like a liberation for me. I felt like, cool, I can stop doing this. Yeah. This thing that's hindering me. And if it's hindering me, it's obviously hindering everybody else. Yeah. And I feel like...
So everybody saw Jason just kind of were like, okay, we'll all...
Yeah, it's a matter of respect. Yeah. First and foremost, he's my friend. So I feel that my responsibility to my friend is to be there for him. And when he, would need support. Yeah. I know that I would need that kind of friend. And I did, And I think him sobering up helped me sober up and allowed me to help him help me help him. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like there was it was team. A beautiful thing. Yeah. And that's the best thing that's happened really out of all of this, man, is that we can all now live, and live for real instead of like just living in that funk and that haze and that disease.
When did Chad join when did y'all, when was he around in 06, 07? You said something about multiple drummers.
Chad was, I think, living in Memphis when we started the band up, and I do remember his name being tossed around then, but he was living in Memphis, and I think he was busy doing some other things. Yeah. And I'd been playing with a fellow that I thought was an okay drummer at the time, and so Jason trusted me to bring him along, and he was okay for a little while, and then the van got broken into in San Francisco, and he just kind of lost his marbles and went to the airport and went home.
The drummer? Yeah. That was with you?
Yeah. In fact, I think he hit Jason up for $100 and then went and got in a cab, went to the airport, and basically flipped us all off.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was
it's hard. It's hard to. And I'd been playing music with that guy for 5 or 6 years before that in various outfits, and it's really hard to forgive somebody for that, man. I mean, I guess I forgive him, but it's just really hard to bring the heart and the trust back for somebody that does that,
Yeah, to just leave you hanging, because I figure y'all probably had gigs and shows lined up.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were on the West Coast, man. We still had to go north to Portland.
What did you get another drummer?
Yeah, Dave Bryson from Sunvolt came out and played with us, and thank goodness we had Derry with us at the time, and Derry was in Sunvolt before he joined with us.
Yeah, Chance had mentioned that.
And so Dave came and finished out the tour. Thank goodness, and I'll forever love Dave Bryson.
Yeah,
he lives in Argentina now with his wife, and is just, I can imagine he's like, it must be just like living in paradise,
living the dream.
So
Jason, he was the only guitar player for a while, wasn't he?
No, Broen Lawler was our second guitar player for a long time.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I know. What was the Live in Alabama album?
Yeah, he wasn't with us at the time.
Okay,
he had left the band by then.
Okay,
but the 2 records before that, Broen was on.
Okay,
yeah.
When did Sadler come along? Do you remember?
He came along after Southeastern.
Oh, okay,
during the initial, just right before we started touring for it.
I was talking with Chance sometime in the last couple of days, and I know we've talked about this before with other groups that he's been on the road with. It's got to be tough when you're with the same guys all the time, and then you have to start bringing in new like crew guys or techs or people, like establishing a trust with new people that you have with, Jason that you've known since you were 14, or, the people that you're with.
Right.
It's got to be, because you want to like them and you want to trust them, but you're still kind of like, who's this new person?
Yeah, well, I think it's like, that's just a natural thing.
Yeah.
I think you can tell a lot from someone after 10 or 15 minutes of hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's very tough. My first gig with these dudes was February the 11th here in Austin at the Moody Theater where we are tonight. And I don't remember the day because I was just nervous trying to do my job and trying to learn people's names, people's temperaments, And
it being your, favorite artist and band probably added to the...
Yeah, just, so much respect for these people. And I didn't want to be the weak link in the chain.
Yeah. You wouldn't be with us if you was a weak link.
I know. It's a cool thing, but, all the guys were very nice to me and very welcoming, so I feel like it didn't take long to...
It was cool what you were saying the other day about, I forgot who you said you were talking to about it, somebody on the crew, that one of the reasons that it's such a good machine, all y'all working together, is because everybody really cares about the overall project, the overall Jason and the 400 unit show. Like everybody cares about their particular, the lighting.
I feel like sound, everybody is very into what they're doing.
They're not just there to get a paycheck or whatever.
Like nobody was assigned this gig from a company. Everybody who is here wants to be here, and especially, the band guys. And even some of the crew guys have been here 5 years or so now, and everybody's certainly heavily invested in it. And I think, that brings a certain amount of unity to the group. And
it's like
I feel
a family.
We very much roll with a family vibe, and that's a very special and a very rare thing, as I've found jumping around from gig to gig over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool thing whenever everyone's invested and everyone wants to be there. And from a crew standpoint, I feel like we all kind of push each other. It's a very a friendly, competitive thing because Mikey wants his lights to be the best lights in the world, and Kane wants the sound to be the best sound. And I hear them talking about that, and I'm like, well, I want to sell more shirts than anybody in the world. Yeah. And we all just kind of push each other. And rewinding a little bit, the first week that I came with you guys after we played Austin, we went to Dallas, and that was the Grammy ceremony. Jason and Amanda flew out there.
Oh yeah,
and he got his 2 Grammys. I had not yet met Jason at all through the first few days, and we were in a hotel in Dallas watching the thing, and it was very special for me to see you guys were all so happy and celebrating. And then I thought, oh man, they're gonna look at me like, look at this guy shows up the week we win some Grammys. Where was he when we were changing tires in the snow?
Taylor Swift guy.
But luckily, I don't think they really they didn't hold that against me.
I think I gave you a hug too.
Yeah, you did. I got hugs and high fives.
I'm sure you did.
It made me feel good, even at the time. I was just getting in the game here.
Aside from the Isbell thing, which is most of a lot of what we talked about, does Jimbo Hart have ultimate goal, like musically or in life, or like what do you
Oh man,
just gonna kind of
honestly, I try to think ahead some.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to think ahead because I have so much music in my head all the time.
Yeah.
And I think the older I get, the harder it is to turn the tape machine off in my head. And I'm always just I'm more concerned about, am I going to do good today? Am I going to play the bass good today?
Yeah.
And I think eventually, I think everybody wants a nice place to live and, family and, a little piece of land or something.
Right.
Those are things you trade off early in the game, hoping that one day you will have those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. My whole spin on the whole legend of they say Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil, to do what he does. I don't really think you sell your soul to the devil. I just think you trade other things like that, like, stability on a domestic level.
Yeah, if we all wanted to
an
we
extent.
we could all be married brick masons with 3 kids and a house and a new truck back in Alabama if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you trade, you trade for things you're passionate about.
And even some of our crew are married. Some of our crew are about to be married. Half the band's married.
Yeah.
I mean, they still sacrifice things, and I see it from time to time. When Chad joined us, his daughter was very young, and there were times when he had to sacrifice things. And I had to watch him suffer.
Yeah.
I can't do anything other than be there for him because I don't have any children, so I can't really relate to that pain.
Right.
But, I think at the same time, not having any kids at all is kind of its own sort of emotional pain. There's all sorts of things that I dream of that, are pretty far away from reality, it seems like,
Yeah.
It's weird, It's not like, back in the 80s, it was all like groupies and there's women everywhere. But nowadays it's modern, That shit ain't safe, man.
Yeah.
So nobody really does that anymore. And so being in a band don't really, at my age, doesn't really matter that much in that terms of the dating realm and all that, because I'm never there to date anyway. So,
Yeah, dating. What is that?
Yeah, what is that?
Right.
What is that?
So today is July the 15th.
Yeah.
June 16th, you guys dropped the Nashville Sound, which, to the best of my understanding, debuted at number 4 on the Billboard Top 200. You had the number 1 country album and the number 1 rock album, the number 1 Americana folk album, and the number 1 Americana or
something else.
Yeah, there were so many.
Independent, maybe?
Independent, yeah. Number 1 out of everything. And the thing that stood out to me really on that is that first week there was 54,000 units sold. Of that 54,000, 51 were actual CDs and vinyl records.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that's amazing. That. I'm really proud that vinyl, that much vinyl was moved. I'm really loving the shift toward the more organic media.
Yeah, it's such a whole different experience.
Yeah, it's about the experience. Yeah. It's about the time it takes you to sit down,
get the record out, turn it out.
It's a ritual.
Yeah. For sure.
For some of us, it might be pouring yourself a drink. For some of us, it might be a nice cup of tea or a nice cup of coffee. Some of us, it might be a joint or a cigarette or whatever it is. Or some of us might not be anything at all, but just the pure joy of the sound itself. And some of us, it's nothing but a blank, empty room and a couple of really phenomenal speakers put in the right place.
I was listening to
I would
James
love
Hetfield.
to have a place like that in my house one day. Maybe that's a dream I'll have.
James Hetfield was on, I think it was on Mark Maron's podcast.
Yeah.
But I was listening to him. He was talking about how happy he was when he noticed his kids were starting to listen to vinyl, and they were talking about the process and everything. And so that got me feeling the mood. So I went home that night and put on a Christopherson album and just front to back, both sides, just didn't do anything but sit there and listen to the words.
And felt it.
Just, yeah. It's just it's so different than going up iTunes on your phone
and putting in your earbuds,
Yeah.
or just connecting to your Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not the same depth. It's not the same richness. It's not the same organic connection between you and the music. You know,
Where did y'all
physical thing?
Y'all record that at
RCA.
Yeah, RCA.
RCA
yeah.
Studio A.
Yeah, how was that?
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was great, man. I've never been in a studio that big, and it was big enough to where all of us, well, besides Chad was in a pretty good sized little booth himself.
Yeah.
But all of us were in the same room
That's
together.
cool. Yeah.
And all of our guitars were in there with us, and like, you know, everybody's there was
It's all mixed in there.
was 15 drum kits down the wall. You know, all of Dave's stuff was in the room. All
Yeah.
of his instruments, all of our instruments.
Dave Cobb, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
those
amplifiers, so many amplifiers, dude. Just because everybody brought everything that they know that they love.
Now, was it, I think this is right, is it true that y'all hadn't heard any of the songs until that week?
No, I hadn't heard a thing.
That's crazy.
So you guys just went in on the fly.
Yeah.
How does that work? Like he just comes in and says, here's the song and plays it?
Well,
Or
we
like a
schedule
demo
the
or something?
studio dates
Yeah.
and say if it starts on quote unquote Monday morning.
Yeah.
You show up on Monday morning, have a cup of coffee, everybody hangs out for a little bit, gets acclimated,
Right.
might get some sounds. And whenever all that's in order, you know, and it's time to move on to the next phase, Jason will play us the song, usually on his guitar. And if he feels it on the electric, he'll play it on the electric. If he feels it on the acoustic, he'll play it on the acoustic. And
Yeah.
he plays the song down for us. Some of us take notes. Some of us just, you know, tunnel in on it and stick it in there in the head and digest it. It's like eating it's like eating breakfast or something. You know, there's this plate of what you have to work with today. You know,
Yeah.
and you take it in and you go. And yeah, we just sit down at our instruments or stand up with our instruments or however the vibe may be. And
Does Jason have, because this is where I'm curious about, because I think it's different with everybody, like everything in this world. Does Jason have more of an idea, like of how he wants the song structure to go, or is that where Dave Cobb, the producer, comes in, or is it just a combination?
sometimes a combination of
Yeah.
both. More often than not, there's definitely a back and forth between them.
Yeah.
As to what should happen where, and maybe Dave might have a few ideas for a drum beat or a particular approach for the bass or the guitar. He might want to play acoustic guitar too,
Yeah.
or he might shake a shaker, or he might just sit there and just vibe.
Yeah.
You know,
How many days were you guys in the studio recording this?
I want to say it was only a couple of weeks.
Because I think I was watching something in a city we were in a few weeks ago, maybe on the Fleetwood album or Fleetwood Mac album, Rumors. It took like a year
Yeah.
or so to record. So
Yeah.
it blows my mind. You know,
Well-
you guys going to do this in a few days now.
Here's the thing, man. The music business is a completely different industry than it was when that record was made.
Right.
You know, those guys had millions of dollars in advance from the record company to make those records. So they did what they could. They spent it on studio time and they spent it on tape, and they, you know, took their time because they could afford the time to be there. You know, the record company would, you know, they just had a lot more money to do a lot more time.
Yeah.
Nowadays, studio time is relatively expensive, and when you don't have any kind of major label support, you got to make the best of what you have when you have it. And I feel like even if we could afford to be in a bigger studio for even a longer amount of time, I don't think we'd still spend any more time on it than we'd have to.
Right.
You know, I feel like we get pretty close to it in the first 2 or 3 takes, and then maybe the fourth one's it. Sometimes the first take's it. Sometimes the second take is it. You know, it's just, and it's different now too, because now you can't take the time to foolproof it so much like they did back then. You know, they'd spend days and days on the snare drum sound, you know.
Yeah.
When in actuality, they're going to wear the tape out by the time they get done recording the snare drum in the first place.
If they keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you're working with tape, it degrades over time. You know, you keep hitting that tape with a kick drum or a snare drum, and it wears it out, stretches it, rearranges the magnets in it, and it wears out the tape. So, you know, well, shit, now we got to have a new tape. So they go get another tape, and there's time involved in that and all that kind of stuff. So nowadays, it's easier to be more efficient because there's not that degradation in quality over time. So you're not fighting the machines as much as you used to have to fight them back in the days when it cost millions of dollars to make a beautiful record.
Do you have a favorite song on the new CD?
Oh, man.
I don't know. Is that an improper question?
No, that's cool, man. I like them all. I mean, the thing is, the record is such a collection of eccentricities to me.
Is there like a favorite one to play on bass as far as just being a bass player?
All of them.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, I can't really name one that I like more than another.
Yeah. That's
no,
cool.
I mean, because they all present their own message. They all present their own vibe and mood and their own challenges to all of us as musicians.
Right.
And I feel like, you know, the fun is in honing that. You know, the fun is in getting better at doing it, or maybe we find out that it's better if we loosen up a little bit on it from time to time rather than tightening it up, you know. Like, I mean, because we don't spend a whole lot of time on things in the studio, when we get to playing them live, it evolves on its own.
Yeah.
Over time in the live show. And that's the funnest part, man. You know, and
seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
Like that in the evolution
Yeah.
evolution of the song.
Yeah. And you realize what you might have could have done a little differently or a little better when you recorded it, or what you might have missed out on, and you think, oh, why didn't I think of that then? But, you know, in actuality, when we record, we try to get just the essence of the idea.
Yeah.
You know, just get it down. Just play it right one time. That's all you got to do. And if all of us play it right one time at the same time, even better. You know, because you think about like Motown and even like the Beatles before they had, you know, the multi-track capability, before Sgt. Pepper's and all that, you know. The older Muscle Shoals stuff, even, it was all one take in the room. Everybody.
Yeah.
You play it one time, it's done. You know.
There's like some of those old Candy Staten recordings and stuff. You can hear like where like the drummer screws up a little bit.
Sure.
Or like you can hear just the little imperfections, but
yeah.
You know,
but that's the thing that makes you kind of hold on to the groove, because you're like, wait.
Yeah.
You know, and you have some physical interaction with the music with that imperfection.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just makes it more human, you know. And I think that, like, you know, even going back to, like, you know, Sam Phillips and Elvis and Johnny Cash and all those guys, you know, they were in one tiny little room.
Yeah.
And Sam had, like, 3 tracks, you know, and you think about, like,
the magic that was
the magic.
Out of that
it's
place,
you know, it's not Sam and the tracks. It's the guys playing in the room, and he just happened to capture it.
Yeah.
You know, and then figured out if he had another tape machine, he could set it a little bit different speed.
Yeah.
And run it through there too, and create a slapback, which made it sound real cool, man. You know, and hi-fi and weird for the times, you know, because that wasn't anything anybody was doing.
Right.
And nowadays, you know, it's kind of the same concept, but it's so much easier to get bogged down in a million tracks, or how many channels can you send per instrument or whatever, you know. like it, mixing and all that. It can really get convoluted,
For
so
sure.
to speak.
Well, I think we got one more show tonight and tomorrow night, right? We're a three day run. I'm actually I'm assistanting for Chance
Nice.
for merchandise this weekend here in Austin. What time do y'all have? I don't guess you have a sound check or anything since you played last night.
I don't think we're doing sound check today, but I think we are tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to go get the merch ready here before too long.
Awesome.
One more question. If you could give yourself at 18, 19 years old a piece of advice, anything in the world, what would it be? If you could go back and tell yourself something.
Oh, man.
On the spot. Chance, what would yours be?
Oh, my God. I don't know.
While Jimbo thinks about it, what would yours be?
If I could go back and tell myself, man, I don't know, probably to power through it.
Yeah.
Go, man, go.
Just one of my favorite quotes ever is the "Find what you love and let it kill you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me personally, that means a lot, and I've found what I love. It is music. I do several things in the realm of because I love it. It's not always for money or fame or glory or any of those things, but at the end of the day, I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. And it has to be the same way for you guys. We do it because we all love it.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't feel that I don't feel that I'm ever going to retire. I feel like wherever music takes me, it's going to take me there. If I make it to 70 or 80 or 90 or whatever, and I'm sitting playing in a bar in Tennessee, okay, fine. That's where the muse wants me to go. That's where I go. I follow that.
Right on, man.
I think that's awesome. I think Jimbo, you're a great man. You're a great bass player.
Oh, I agree.
And a friend. And for my part in this, it's a great pleasure to be able to work with you and travel the country with you.
It's good times, man.
Every day.
Glad to have another feller from Alabama here with her.
And the same goes for all the other guys too. I've never met or been around a more loving and accepting group of people, and I've learned so much of accepting others, loving other people that they might be different or their ideas are different. It's all beautiful things that I've picked up from you guys, and a lot of new music.
Yeah.
You guys all are really bad music nerds, and you name off bands I've never heard of, and I want to go home and listen to it and go, man, this is so good.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for talking, Jimbo.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, dude.
Appreciate you guys. Cheers.
Bass extraordinaire and fine human being, Jimbo Hart, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Jimbo for the hang and the conversation. It's always cool to hear how people's lives come together and how things happen. Well, it's cool to me anyway. I assume on some level it's cool to you, or you wouldn't still be sitting there listening to this. Now, I'll have info on Jimbo and Jason and the band, tour dates and video links and all that and more will be at don'tstifleme.com/022. And if you get a chance, you should absolutely go see Jason and Jimbo and the guys play. Don't miss out on it. I mean, I've seen them numerous times, and it's always a great show. And yeah, you won't be sorry. So that does it for today's episode. That's it. Thanks for listening. If you have any feedback or any questions, you can shoot those to jacob@don'tstifleme.com. That's me. You're emailing me there. Or you can send it to any of the podcast social medias. That's at DSM Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm on everything as at Jacob Stiefel. And once again, my music, merchandise, tour dates, all that can be found at jacobstiefel.com. And my friends, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is where we part ways for now. Not forever, just for now. I'll be back next week. And right now I'm going to go put more coffee in my coffee cup so I can then drink it. And you should go out into the world, work hard, be nice, have fun, all that good stuff. And I will talk to you again soon.